to see them.
Hi.
Felt like I was just
Ready to go. We gotta go home and do a whole bunch of cooking for work tomorrow, so.
Are you having a potluck?
We're having a baking competition.
Oh.
What are you baking?
I am going for the outside the box route. We got savory and sweet. Going savory, and I'm taking complete play and going and just cooking up some glazed candied bacon.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was like, I can go real.
That sounds good.
Yeah, it's like everybody else is trying to do like sweets, do enchiladas or garlic bread. I'm like, I'm just gonna go for the
Can't go wrong with bacon, that's for sure.
yeah. That's
What's
what
your
I'm
candy bacon?
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty, I will call this Thursday, August 1st, 2019, Utility Advisory Commission meeting to order. Please join with me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we will take any public comments. Seeing none, we will move forward to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda is standing approval of the minutes. Are there any comments? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. There was a motion made by Harrison, seconded by Williams to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, moving on to new business, Gons. We have
Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners. The first item is the purchase of a compact excavator and skid loader for the Line Maintenance Division. For the Commissioners, they're new. The Line Maintenance Division is responsible for maintaining the water distribution lines and the wastewater collection lines. As such, they perform water meter repairs, hydrant repairs, valve repairs. They also do sanitary sewer repairs. We currently have heavy equipment, excavators, that sometimes will require a small footprint in order to minimize the damage on lawns or backyards. So last year, we budgeted the purchase of a mini excavator and a skid loader. So following the city's purchasing policy, we requested 3 quotes from Heritage Tractor, Coleman Equipment, and KC Bobcat. And Casey Bobcat has the lowest price for the excavator and the skid loader. For the excavator, their price is $45,126, and for the skid loader, $46,565. The city staff is recommending the purchase of the Bobcat equipment based on the reputation of the manufacturer and the experience of staff operating Bobcat equipment. So we have two recommendations. The first one is approve the recommendation for the purchase of a compact excavator for the Line Maintenance Division from Casey Bobcat for the amount of $45,126. And the second is approve a recommendation for the purchase of a skid loader for the Line Maintenance Division from Casey Bobcat for the amount of $46,565. Any questions?
This is not a replacement for existing equipment, correct?
No, sir. We don't have a mini excavator or a skid loader right now.
I'm sorry.
We don't have those equipment. These are new equipment.
And you have a place to keep it? I mean, there's room in the storage facilities?
Yes, sir.
I noticed on the quote from John Deere that it had a suggested list price and then an extended price. And the extended price was quite a bit less than the suggested. And that they were also offering an extended repair plan for $0. I noticed that the suggested price was on the quote sheet, the first sheet. Do you know why the extended one wasn't considered?
But I think is extended.
The suggested price was $79 and the extended was $55. Quite a bit of reduction. And with both of them together, it was only like a $7,000 difference, but John Deere was offering an extended warranty plan.
But I thought the extended was an additional cost.
Well, it said zero cost.
Well, like I said, staff went by the lowest cost, and also because of the Bobcat brand. That is a very reliable and well-known. And our budget was $50,000, so that was below our budget also.
Okay.
And he had all the options we were looking for.
Okay. Is there any further discussion for this? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the staff recommendation for purchase of this equipment.
Okay. There's been a motion made by Williams. Is there a second?
I'd second that.
Okay. There was a second made by Taylor. So there was a motion made by Williams, seconded by Taylor, to approve the staff recommendation. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Then the second item will be presented by Scott Milholland. He's the Keel Creek Water Resource Recovery Facility Superintendent.
Got the clicker, Aaron? You clicking? Perfect. Good evening. How we doing?
Good.
The city wastewater is collected in the city collection system through 21 lift stations. The Big Bull Creek lift station, which is at 329 Meadowbrook Circle, is one of our major lift stations. So it takes the flows from a lot of the lift stations down south. What we're looking at doing is basically going through and redoing, putting a new grinder in the lift station. When that lift station was initially constructed, it was constructed with the grinder that's the size of the grinder was actually the channel. So the channel, when the wastewater comes in, it actually runs through a channel, and that channel was designed with that grinder in mind. So the grinder is basically a direct fit to the channel. It's basically been in there in service since 2008. So anything that gets flushed down that comes through that service runs through that grinder. Basically 4x4s, 6x6s, you name it, it goes through that grinder, gets ground up. Typically life expectancy on those grinders is 7 to 10 years. We've gotten a little bit more out of this one, but you can tell in some of the pictures that basically the end shafts and the bearings and the cutter teeth are just completely gone. And we typically will pull that up and service that 2 times a year. There's a bunch of grease zerks on it. The problem that we've had is the grinder, where it's set in place, the concrete's actually swelled in. So we can't get this. So we was able to get the grinder out, but when we put the new one in, we're gonna have to pull it forward and basically put some new guide rails in. The nice thing with going back with the existing grinder is all the controls, all the cables, all the wires and everything are already there. So it's basically an existing savings at $8,000. So that's a cost that we're not gonna have to occur again. The new grinders, to try to get something that will retrofit, basically they're gonna have 2 motors. You're gonna have more motor starters, more electrical, more cost. So we went to Fluid Equipment. $39,977 was the direct replacement for that. So we've gotten a new motor. We're gonna use the existing controls for a savings over $8,000, and the existing motor that was on the unit is still good. So we can pull that off, basically put that on the shelf. So if we ever do have a problem with a motor, and typically that's what'll go wrong with them, the motors, we've actually got one of those set on the shelf. So if worst case scenario, it does go bad, we've actually got an extra one in the shelf to drop in. So you can see by some of the pictures, Aaron, if you want to show them some of the pictures, if it's on there. Was it not? Is it not on there? You got it? Yeah.
we got it.
Yeah, you can kind of look through some of that. And that thing, like I say, those grinders will run 24 hours a day, so they never shut off. So as the flow comes through there, and the reason for that is anything that goes through there actually gets ground up. So when we actually did demos on them, they'll actually run a 6x6 and run that through that thing, and it just chews everything up. And what that does, that's pump protection for us. So it's actually kind of impressive to see if you ever get a chance to see it. But the nice thing with the JWC is, and we sole source it for the reason that it was specifically designed to fit in that lift station. And we've also got 7 other ones. So the cutter teeth on those, that same, even though it's taller, we've got some that are taller and shorter, but they use the same stackable teeth. So we've got a set of teeth, bearings, some extra parts that's sitting in the storage room. If we need to go out and replace them, we can. So that's why we opted to go with sole source on that and the cost and the savings to the city with the initial electrical repairs that we wouldn't have to do. So recommendation is to replace that Fluid Equipment, $39,977.64. Staff recommendation. And that was also one of our CIP projects, because we knew it was getting to the point where it was getting kind of bad. So when we sat down and put together our CIP program a couple of years ago, we actually did include that in our CIP plan, which was WW1906. So it fell right in line with about how we thought it was gonna pan out. So, any questions?
This is way outside my element, but if it's so important, shouldn't we have 2 grinders there?
We have extra parts. Typically, when they get to that point, it was still running. But as the concrete bowed in, it actually took the gears and everything that was in the bottom there and just basically snapped it. So we can actually get a replacement for that. If I call them, the replacement is actually I can have it in a week. And we've got redundancy. Instead of the grinder, we've actually got a bar screen. And basically what that is exactly what it is. It's basically a screen that has a bunch of slots that are an inch apart, and that will stop all your big flows. So your tree limbs, whatever they can get down the sewer, and believe me, it's a lot, it'll actually stop the bigger flows. So it's not a dire need that we can actually drop a bar screen in and we could wait a month before we actually need it.
There's no need to long-term rebuild.
And we did. We actually put that in our CIP plan. I knew that it was getting bad. The guys were saying, hey, it's starting to show wear on some of the bearings and some of the teeth. We rebuilt the motor once already. And that's the reason why we kind of put it in our CIP plan.
But what I was thinking is,
put one on the shelf.
Should the whole lift station be redesigned so that
Typically, it's pretty common when you're building a lift station, the way they've actually did it, because it's a really weird deal, because we've got the big Bull Creek lift station, which is pretty good size. And then we've got a little bitty lift station right beside it. So when they designed it back in '08, what should have happened, but due to cost restraints, it didn't. It should have been lowered like 2 foot. And if it would have been lowered 2 more foot, we could have got rid of the little bitty Bull Creek. So we've actually got 2 lift stations within the size of this room pumping into one. So there's a little bitty lift station and then a big lift station. The big lift station takes it out to Gill Creek. So yes, we could have got rid of that one little bitty lift station and just used one. But at the time, I think it was like $140,000 to take down, because it was 2 foot of rock. So they didn't want to take and chop the rock out. So we opted to leave the little bitty lift station and pump to the big one and then back out to the plant. So, and there's not a set. That's basically a channel grinder. Now the one we've got out to the Kill Creek, the plant, it's basically a bolt in place, and it's taller than what I am, and it's made to take a lot more flows. So they're pretty flow. They basically build them just like they do the pumps. I mean, it's size restraint and it's flow. How many GPMs you're going to put through there? We're running about 250,000 a day through that grinder. So, and that's the reason why we went ahead and put it on the CIP. To have one in stock, typically you're going to have a motor go bad or some bearings or some cutter teeth, and we've got that stuff sit back that will actually retrofit with some of the other JWC grinders that we have in stock. So that's the only reason why we don't have an extra one in stock. Typically, if I have one that's totally bad, I can rebuild. I can send it to them, and they'll send me a direct replacement. They'll take the outside casing, put new shafts, new cutter teeth, new bearings, new spacers, repaint it, and ship it back out. So it's a little bit easier cost. With this one, it's in such bad shape that as that concrete pressed it in, it basically took the bottom of that grinder and caved it in. So basically it's core, like if you're buying a motor for your car. If you buy a motor, they want the old core so they can rebuild it. It's kind of the same lines, but this we had to go back with brand new, because as the bottom of that got pinched,
So,
the core wasn't no good basically.
so are you doing concrete work too?
What we're doing, we're actually going to move that. There's enough electrical wire there. We might have to put another foot on, but it's not that big a deal. We're going to take that and move that farther to the west, to the end of that channel. So if we ever have to do it again, even if it does pinch, we can pull it forward, pull it right out. So we won't have that problem anymore. So I think what it is when they put that in there, I think they pulled the forms a little early, and it's right as the flow goes in, then it pinches it down and it goes back out. It's fine. So I don't know what happened to the ground shift. They maybe didn't get good compaction on that particular spot, but the rest of the channel's fine. So this one, we put this one back in. So as the channel goes back out, it drops out to the rest of the wet well. We'll actually mount that grinder on the end channel, so we won't have any problems with the concrete pinching it anymore. So
You sound optimistic.
I'm pretty confident. Any more questions?
Hearing no more questions, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
My second.
Okay. Can I get clarification? Can you just give me the
Oh,
motion?
yeah, I make a motion that we approve new business item number 2 for the city council to purchase a new grinder from Fluid Equipment in the amount of $39,977.64.
Okay.
And I second.
Okay. There's been a motion made by Harrison, seconded by Coleman, to approve a recommendation to the city council to purchase a new grinder from Fluid Equipment in the amount of $39,977.64. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll just keep standing.
You're on a roll.
Basically, the South Lift Station update, everything is going, well, I'll just read this from here, stuff from me rambling. The South Lift Station is progressing towards substantial completion, programming of the electrical components, pump installation, tank testing, site grading cleanup is occurring. Water line complex and hydro testing should be completed today, and it was completed. It was actually completed yesterday. Everything's going as planned. I figured at this point with all the rain, we'd be way farther behind than what we are. But Crossland's doing a great job, and they're very easy to work with. The subcontractors that they have on the job, the electrical guys, lights out, hats off to them guys because they're doing a great job. I figured at this point we'd be way farther behind than what we were, but Crossland's doing a bang up job on that. So hats off to those guys. ASCO transfer switch is completed. We will probably run, I'm gonna go off page here because I was at the meeting today, update. I'm gonna grab my list. Basically the tank, right now the way it sits, it's full. So we basically got it a little over half full. What's gonna happen, that's gonna sit for another 2 weeks. And once that's completed, then we'll go ahead and continue to fill that up to the top, and then that sits for another couple weeks. What that basically does is that tests the pressure on the tank, make sure we ain't got no leaky bolts, everything runs as expected. Looks to me like we will probably done, completed through the end of August, the way that they're going. August 16th, which is a Friday, they're gonna continue to fill. That should be done, and I'm guessing by September 6th-ish, they'll be up and gone and out of there. So the way it looks now is everything's running. You can kind of see the big generator there on the left-hand side. That's our new CAT generator. That will actually go ahead and run the 250 horsepower pumps and the other 2 pumps and the other 3 pumps we got in the storage station. So it's probably 3 to 4 times bigger than the old generator that we had in there to begin with. So that's kind of a nice thing to have to run that whole entire station. The farthest picture on the right is basically all the controls, the main breakers, the transfer switches on the far right. Like I say, the guys are just doing a bang up job. I didn't figure they'd be this far ahead. But Matt with Yates Electrical is really doing a nice job. You can kind of see that MCC control panel, and basically what that is a bunch of breakers. It's basically the motor control center that runs all the different pumps. Okay, more pictures.
Those 6 are all I have.
Okay, that's it. Like I say, the yard restoration, everything's done. They're getting ready to start doing some asphalt work, weather permitting. They've got to cut about 16 foot of asphalt out where the initial drive was at, and then they're going to start building that retaining wall. The material that the retaining wall sits on, it's got to be good and dry. So when they pack that on there, everything's got to be just right. The weather's got to be good. And once they put that on there and build that wall, they'll go ahead and continue to pack everything. And then they'll start building our driveway into the lift station. So, but yeah, as far as the update on it, everything's going as planned, and I'm pleasantly surprised and pleased at the same time. So, that's about it. I think they've already did a lot of site grading on there, so everything's pretty much up to grade. They've got some dirt work, which will continue until they get the drive in. Probably the last thing on the sheet will be the fencing. You can kind of see the fencing in the far left-hand picture. We kept as much of the fencing as we could for cost. When that's all done, they'll continue to run the fence up to the street, back down. It'll go back to the north and then go back to the west around the whole facility. So the whole facility will be enclosed. And really, you can't even see it from the highway, which was surprising to me. I thought, being as tall as wood, you'd kind of be able to see it, but the way it's sitting there, it's kind of tucked back into the trees, and you really don't even never know it's there. So the nice thing with that and the station, the way it sits, if we ever decide to put a plant down south, which hopefully we get the growth and everything down south, we basically went through some measures and some piping to, if we actually want to put a plant, we can actually use that lift station as a lift station for the new wastewater treatment plant if we decide we want to put one in. So basically, the only thing we'll have to do is drop in a couple variable frequency drives on some of the pumps, and everything else is set in place. So it's going to be nice to have that redundancy when the rain occurs, because we do got a lot of I&I, so we're working on that as well. So that's all I got. Any questions?
When did you say it was gonna be completed?
I'm guessing the first week of September.
Really?
Yeah. So, and like I say, with all the rain, we've had a ton of rain. There was a ton of rain days involved with that, and it might even be before that. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed. If we don't get any more rain and the weather permits, I'm guessing first part of September. Definitely by October they'll be complete and we'll be done. So,
what is the location of this?
if you go across, if you go across I-35,
Yeah.
headed south, the very first street you can go back to the east on. If you take a left right there and go down there, it's probably 1/8 of a mile on the left-hand side. So it's kind of across from Olathe RV and back to the north a little bit. So as soon as you get past as soon as you go over I-35, instead of taking a left, getting on I-35, going back to Kansas City, just go a little bit farther and there's a gravel road. That's the first gravel road on your left. If you go down there like an eighth of a mile, you'll start looking and you'll see the tank. It's on the left-hand side. So like I say, it's tucked back in there and it's kind of surrounded by trees. So it's actually pretty aesthetically pleasing, if you will, for that big a tank.
And this is to take care of the future load?
Basically what it's for is our I&I. You know, we've got such an I&I problem, inflow and infiltration, is that when we get a heavy load, that lift station really can't handle it. So that keeps us from bypassing. So any of that wastewater, if we don't put it in that tank,
you're gonna
and
store it in the tank
that's exactly what we're gonna do. It's a million gallon.
temporarily till you can.
Correct. It's a million gallon tank. Well, the nice thing with that is as the flow comes to us and we can't actually force it back to the north to Kill Creek, I can actually put the flow in that tank and we'll run it up to 1 million gallons. And as the weather permits, we can actually run that back down through the lift station, then back out to the plant. So if need be, we could hold it for a couple weeks if need be, if we get a giant rain event. Now we've got that one, will give us 1 million down south. We've got one over at the east lift station, was 250,000 gallons. The north lift station, which is not a dome tank, so it's an open tank, so it's an open air tank. It holds 1 million gallons. And then the nice thing with the plant is we've got 2 clarifiers. Each clarifier will actually do about 7.5 million gallons, up to 9. We've actually run 9 through it. They're rated at 7.5, so we've actually got an empty clarifier. We take the clarifiers and we'll rotate them back and forth to do maintenance on them every quarter. We'll actually drain one down and actually use the other one, so we go back and forth. That clarifier will actually hold 1 million gallons as well. So if we get a big golly washer like what the Ottawa had, we can actually store 3.25 million gallons in tanks, wait for the storm to go past, and then we go ahead and at our leisure, we can actually treat it out to the plant. So with the I&I program that we're doing now that we've just started, we're making headways at that. So if we get a lot of that knocked out, hopefully we won't have to use those as much as we do now. But what that does, that keeps us out of hot water with KDHE. Anytime that lift station bypasses and that water comes out and rolls down to the creek, you have to physically write a bypass and send that to KDHE and say, hey, look, we've had way more water than we can handle, so the wastewater is actually protruded out of the lift station and ran into a retrieving stream. You have to say, hey, it might be 50,000 gallons, it might be 500,000 gallons. So that is what that's for, so we don't have to do that. So typically, knock on wood, we haven't had a bypass in a long time, but we've been really close with the water coming up to the top.
Is this an EPA issue?
Yeah, and KDHE, Kansas Department of Health and Environment. So they kind of pushing like, well, if you can't do nothing with the I&I, we're gonna have to do something, so that's the reason why we put the tank in the ground.
I saw this happen in Lawrence today.
Yeah.
Went into the Kansas River.
Yep. And Ottawa too, that's the same, with the maridazine sitting there, all that's, so what we're doing is trying to prevent that from happening. So, and with the tanks, that's actually, it's not really cheap, but it's ultimately, it's a good deal. The thing you gotta remember about wastewater is 99.97% water. So, and that's the deal. So even with, it's a good deal. Even with rainwater, it's even less than that, because it's solution to pollution is dilution. So we just don't want to get the dilution factor going on. We'd rather keep it and actually run it through the plant and treat it. So that's why those storage tanks are there. And the one at the north, it'll get full pretty quick. You wouldn't think 1 million gallons pumped in that tank would go that quick, but you get 4 or 5 hours and it's completely full. So that gives you an idea of the amount of rainfall that we're actually treating. So. Like I say, once we get the I&I started, we'll be on the right path. So, any questions?
This generator, that's for emergency, right?
Correct. Yeah, and that's also regulated by KDHE. You have to have a generator on site with a lift station that size that'll actually run for 24 hours. So that's the size of the generator, because we've got what that generator will take now. We've got the wet weather pump we call wet weather. It's 250 horsepower, and then we've got 4 other pumps in there, 5 other pumps beside that. So there's actually 6 pumps total in that station. So that actually has to bear that load for all those pumps, the electrical, the HVAC, any load that's generated, that generator has to handle, and has to handle for at least a minimum of 24 hours.
So how large is it?
It's pretty good size. I think it was a 450 kVA. It's pretty good size. So, and it'll run, and that tank on that, I think, I haven't seen it run yet, but I'm guessing it'll probably run for over 2 days. Probably at least 48 hours before it's empty.
Gas fired?
No, it's diesel. It's diesel.
Diesel?
Yeah. Every one that we have is diesel. So every one of our bigger stations, our bigger lift stations like that, I call our submersible stations. And what I say by that is If you go around town and you see some of the green, like the Smith and Loveless lift stations is what they are. They're a vacuum prime station. They're kind of a green little box.
Yeah.
You'll see those more in residential areas.
Yeah.
These bigger ones, the pumps are in the ground, so the wet wells are actually in the ground. And they're actually run by a bigger electric pump that actually sits in there. So it'll pump a lot more liquid than the little S&Ls. The S&Ls are basically designed for some of the smaller subdivisions, well, any subdivision really. They make them different sizes. Basically, those lift stations, the small S&L vacuum prime stations, will pump to these bigger stations. And the bigger stations run through a force main, which in turn runs it out to the plant. So, because you've got to have it to get the head pressure and everything to push. So, the smaller S&Ls just won't really do it. So, and they're not big enough, the capacity of the wet well. Most of the wet wells on the S&L stations are 5 to 6 foot diameter, 15 to 20, about 22 foot is about maximum pull on one of those S&L lift stations. Whereas the submersible pumps, 50 foot, no problem. So, and you basically rate that pump on how much head pressure you're going to have to push. So if you say you're going to have to push 75 feet ahead, then they actually build that pump for that type of pump curve. There's a pump curve that everything is actually built on. You kind of look at that pump curve and see the best bang for your buck with how many amps it's pulling, how much loads it's pulling, how much water is it actually going to push. So you're trying to get the best bang for your buck with the pump curve, basically. So,
Thank you.
you bet. Any questions? Thank you very much.
He knows his water.
Just a brief update on the Hillsdale expansion, and it'll be a brief history. The plant, Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant, was constructed back in 1995. It was a 2 million gallon day facility, expanded to 4 in 2008. And we did a master plan in 2017 for the water, and they were recommending expanding or putting an interconnection. So the city looked at the interconnection with Water One, and looking at other options, we decided that the best alternative was to upgrade do an expansion of the existing facility instead of going with Water One. So last year, the city council approved the expansion. Burns and Mack and CAS constructors were hired to do the preliminary design. They provide us an estimated cost today. It's going to be under $25 million. And next week, we need to finalize the numbers and look at the different designs. But it looks now they will be under $25,000 for a 3 million gallon a day facility. That includes a new raw water line from Hillsdale to the plant. And the plan is to have 1 million gallons available for next summer, and the additional 2 million by April 2021. So that's where we stand on Hillsdale. Last year, we had some water restrictions because of the high usage, and that also was a factor for doing the expansion. It's kind of funny because Scott is saying when it doesn't rain and on the water, so we want it to rain so people don't use that much water. So it's funny. But this year we haven't had any restrictions. We reached 3.5 million gallons on Tuesday, I believe, but we're still below the water warning. So cooler temperatures, more rain is favorable for the water. So that's my update on Hillsdale. Any questions? Then Commissioner Harrison asked a question last time about if the cable company is responsible for checking the clearance, and they're responsible for checking the clearance. But we're gonna take a more proactive approach, and we'll be checking on a quarterly or semi-annual basis the clearance on certain pole expansions to make sure they're within the allowable clearance. And if they're not, then we'll send a email, or we'll advise Spectrum to take care of the problem. So that's all I have for you for this meeting. Any questions? No, thank you.
Alrighty. Seeing nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, there was a motion made by Coleman, seconded by Harrison to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.